Welcome to this gripping story where we follow the life of Emma, a woman who thought she had everything she ever wanted. But the reality is completely different. One day her life is turned upside down. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more interesting and thought-provoking stories. Emma had always been a devoted wife to her husband, Mark. They had been married for 10 years, and although their marriage was not without its ups and downs, they always managed to work things out. Emma had been working as a writer for over 20 years and had written several books on different topics, but her true passion was writing about people's lives. She loved getting to know people and telling their stories. One day, Emma decided to surprise her husband by stopping by his office unannounced. Mark worked as a project manager at a software development company. Emma knew that Mark had been under a lot of stress lately, and she wanted to see if she could brighten his day. So she put on her best dress, applied a little makeup, and headed out to Mark's office. As Emma entered the building, she felt a rush of excitement. She was looking forward to seeing her husband and spending some time with him. Emma made her way to the elevator and rode it up to the 10th floor, where Mark's office was located. She walked down the hallway, looking for Mark's office, and finally found it at the end of the hallway. Emma took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in," Mark's voice called out. Emma opened the door and saw her husband sitting at his desk, staring intently at his computer screen. He looked up when he heard her enter, and a smile spread across his face. "Hey, honey, what brings you here?" Mark asked, getting up from his chair and walking over to Emma. "I just wanted to surprise you and see how your day was going," Emma replied, wrapping her arms around her husband. Mark hugged her back and said, "It's going okay. Just a lot of work to do." Emma noticed that Mark seemed a little tense, and she decided to lighten the mood. "Well, I brought you a little something to help you relax," Emma said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small bottle of massage oil. Mark's eyes widened in surprise. "Wow, that's really thoughtful of you, honey." "Thank you," Mark said, taking the bottle from Emma's hand. Emma smiled and said, "I figured you could use a little pampering." Mark grinned and said, "You're the best. Let me finish up a few things, and then we can head home, and I'll let you give me a massage." Emma laughed and said, "Deal." Mark sat back down at his desk, and Emma took a seat on the couch in his office. She looked around the room, taking in the posters and pictures on the walls. As she waited for Mark to finish up his work, Emma overheard a conversation coming from the office next door. She couldn't see who was talking, but she could hear their voices clearly. At first, Emma didn't pay much attention to the conversation. But then she heard her husband's name mentioned, and her curiosity was piqued. Emma leaned in a little closer, trying to listen without being obvious. "I heard that Mark's wife has been getting suspicious lately," one of the voices said. "Yeah, apparently she's been asking a lot of questions about his work," the other voice replied. Emma's heart began to race. What were they talking about? She had never been suspicious of Mark before. What could he be hiding from her? Emma was about to get up and leave when she heard another voice join the conversation. "Mark has been embezzling money from the company," the new voice said. Emma felt as though she had been punched in the stomach. Embezzling money? Her husband? That couldn't be true. Emma sat frozen on the couch, not knowing what to do. As the conversation next door continued, Emma's mind raced. Could this really be happening? Was her husband capable of stealing from his own company? Emma felt sick to her stomach. She didn't know what to do or who to talk to. After what felt like an eternity, Mark finally finished his work and turned to Emma. "Ready to go?" he asked, grabbing his coat from the back of his chair. Emma looked at her husband and felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she loved him and wanted to believe that he was innocent. But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore what she had overheard. Emma took a deep breath and stood up from the couch. "Actually, Mark, can we talk for a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" Mark asked, looking at her with concern. Emma hesitated for a moment before saying, "I overheard something in the office next door. They were talking about you, and they said that you've been embezzling money from the company." Mark's face paled, and he looked as though he had been caught off guard. "What? That's ridiculous. Who said that?" "I don't know. I couldn't see who was talking. But they seemed to know what they were talking about," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark shook his head in disbelief. "I don't know what to say, Emma. That's just not true. I would never do something like that." Emma didn't know what to believe. Part of her wanted to believe her husband, but another part of her couldn't ignore what she had heard. Mark put his hand on Emma's shoulder, looking her straight in the eye. "Listen, Emma. I know things have been tough lately. My job has been really stressful, and I haven't been myself. But I swear to you, I haven't done anything wrong. You have to believe me." Emma looked into Mark's eyes, searching for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity and love. She didn't know what to do. "Okay," she said finally. "I believe you. But can we talk more about this at home? I need to process everything that I heard." "Of course," Mark said, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm just glad we're talking about this. I never want there to be any secrets between us." Emma hugged her husband back, feeling relieved that he seemed to be telling the truth. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that was creeping into her mind. As they left the office, Emma couldn't help but wonder what else her husband was hiding from her. The car ride home was quiet. Emma was lost in thought, replaying the conversation she had overheard in her head. She wanted to believe that her husband was innocent, but there was a nagging doubt at the back of her mind. Mark seemed to sense that something was bothering her. "Are you okay?" he asked, placing his hand on her knee. Emma jumped at the touch, realizing that she had been so lost in thought that she hadn't even realized that they had stopped at a red light. "I don't know, Mark," she said finally. "I want to believe you, but what I overheard was really concerning." "I know," Mark said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But you have to trust me. I would never do anything to jeopardize our family or our future." Emma looked at her husband, seeing the pain and desperation in his eyes. She knew that he meant what he was saying, but she couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that was eating away at her. They arrived home, and Emma tried to put the conversation out of her mind. She made dinner, they watched a movie, and went to bed. But the doubt was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. Over the next few days, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with her husband. He seemed distant and preoccupied, and she couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something from her. One evening, when Mark was at work, Emma decided to do some digging. She went to his office and looked through his desk, hoping to find some clue as to what was going on. As she rifled through the drawers, she found a folder marked Project X Curious. She opened it and found a stack of papers detailing a new project that Mark was working on. But as she read through them, she felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. The project was a joint venture with a company owned by an old flame of Mark's, someone he had dated before he had met Emma. Emma had never been comfortable with their friendship, but Mark had always assured her that there was nothing to worry about. But as she read through the documents, Emma realized that there was more to the story than she had thought. Mark's old flame, Lisa, was not just a business partner. She was also his mistress. Emma's hands shook as she read through the details of their affair. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. All the doubts and fears she had been harboring were suddenly confirmed. She sat at Mark's desk, staring at the documents in front of her. She didn't know what to do next. Emma felt like her world was crumbling around her. She had always thought that she and Mark had a strong and loving marriage. But now, everything she thought she knew was called into question. She sat there for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it all. Part of her wanted to confront Mark and demand an explanation, but another part of her was too afraid of what she might find out. Finally, she took a deep breath and gathered her things. She couldn't stay there any longer. She had to get out and clear her head. As she walked out of the office building, Emma felt a sense of freedom and relief wash over her. She didn't have to deal with this right now. She could take some time to figure out what she wanted to do. But as she was walking to her car, she heard her name being called. She turned to see Lisa, Mark's mistress, walking towards her. "Emma, I'm so sorry," Lisa said, tears in her eyes. "I didn't know he was still married. He told me he was divorced." Emma was taken aback. She had never met Lisa before, but now she was standing in front of her, apologizing for sleeping with her husband. "It's not your fault," Emma said, her voice shaking. "He's the one who betrayed me." Lisa looked at her sympathetically. "I know, but please don't blame yourself either. You deserve better than this." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She got into her car and drove away, feeling more lost and confused than ever before. Emma spent the next few days in a daze. She couldn't believe that her life had turned into a soap opera. She had always thought that infidelity was something that happened to other people, not to her. But now she was faced with the reality of the situation. She didn't know what to do or how to feel. She tried talking to Mark about it, but he was defensive and evasive. He denied that anything was going on between him and Lisa, despite the evidence to the contrary. Emma felt like she was going crazy. How could he lie to her like this? How could he cheat on her with someone he had a history with? As the days went by, Emma found herself becoming more and more distant from Mark. She didn't trust him anymore, and she didn't know if she ever would again. Finally, one day, she decided that she had had enough. She couldn't keep living like this. She needed to make a decision about what she wanted to do. She sat down with Mark and told him that she wanted a divorce. It was the hardest thing she had ever had to do, but she knew it was the right thing. Mark was shocked and angry, but Emma stood her ground. She couldn't stay married to someone she couldn't trust. And so, their marriage ended. Emma moved out of their home and started a new life on her own. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was the only way she could find happiness again. As she looked back on those days, Emma realized that she had been given a second chance. She had the opportunity to start over and build a new life for herself. And as she moved forward, she vowed never to let anyone treat her with anything less than the respect and love she deserved. Months passed, and Emma slowly started to put her life back together. She found a new job, made new friends, and started dating again. But the memory of Mark's betrayal still haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been a fool for not seeing the signs earlier. One day, as she was cleaning out some old boxes in her new apartment, she came across an old photo album. She flipped through the pages, smiling at the memories of happier times. And then, she saw a picture of Mark and Lisa together. They were standing close to each other, their faces pressed together, smiling for the camera. Emma felt a surge of anger and betrayal wash over her. She had thought that she had put all of that behind her, but now it was all coming back. She took the photo out of the album and stared at it for a long time. And then she did something she never thought she would do. She picked up her phone and dialed Lisa's number. "Hello," Lisa answered, sounding surprised. "It's Emma," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I just wanted to know why." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Lisa spoke. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I wish I could take it all back." Emma felt a sense of satisfaction in hearing Lisa's regret, but it was short-lived. She knew that nothing could change what had happened. "Goodbye, Lisa," she said, and hung up the phone. As she sat there, alone in her apartment, Emma realized that she had finally found closure. She had confronted her demons and come out the other side. And even though the road had been long and painful, she knew that she was stronger for having gone through it. She was ready to move forward with her life, one day at a time. It was a sunny Friday afternoon when Emma decided to visit Mark's office. She had been wanting to do it for a while, but had been putting it off. But now, she felt ready to face him. As she walked into the building, she couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. This was the place where it had all started, where she had found out about Mark's infidelity. She made her way to the elevator and pressed the button for the 10th floor. When the doors opened, she stepped out into the familiar hallway. She walked down the corridor, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As she reached Mark's office, she could hear voices coming from inside. She hesitated for a moment, her hand on the doorknob. Should she just turn around and leave? But then she took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Mark was standing at his desk, talking to a woman who Emma didn't recognize. They both turned to look at her as she walked in. "Emma," Mark said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to talk to you," Emma said, her voice steady. Mark looked at her for a moment, and then turned to the woman beside him. "Can you give us a minute, please?" The woman nodded and walked out of the office, closing the door behind her. Mark walked over to where Emma was standing, his hands in his pockets. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Emma took a deep breath. This was it. She had rehearsed this conversation in her head 1,000 times, but now that she was here, she didn't know where to begin. "I just wanted to know why," she said finally. "Why did you do it?" Mark looked at her, his expression pained. "I don't know, Emma. I wish I did. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had heard these words before, from Mark and from Lisa. But somehow, they sounded different now. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she said quietly. "I understand," Mark said. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope that someday you can find it in your heart to move on." Dear viewers, sorry to distract you from the story, but I want to ask you to subscribe to my channel. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers, because I'm trying only for you. Thank you. Emma nodded and then turned to leave. As she walked out of the office, she knew that this was the last time she would see Mark. And even though it was painful, she knew that it was the right thing to do. As Emma made her way out of the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had heard Mark's apologies before, but this time they seemed hollow. And the way he had looked at her, as if he was hiding something, made her uneasy. She decided to wait outside the building for a few minutes, just to see if anything unusual happened. As she stood there, she noticed a car pull up to the curb. It was a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver got out and opened the back door. A man in a suit stepped out and made his way into the building. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had seen enough movies to know what this looked like. Was Mark involved in something shady? Was he in danger? She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then she decided to follow the man in the suit. She walked back into the building and took the elevator up to the 10th floor. As she stepped out of the elevator, she saw the man in the suit walking down the hallway. She followed him, keeping a safe distance. He stopped in front of Mark's office and knocked on the door. Emma held her breath as she heard Mark's voice from inside. "Come in." The man in the suit opened the door and walked in. Emma could hear muffled voices, but she couldn't make out what they were saying. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then she heard something that made her blood run cold. "The shipment is coming in tonight. Make sure everything is ready." Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. What shipment? What was Mark involved in? She had to know more. She walked down the hallway, pretending to look at the artwork on the walls, until she was out of earshot of Mark's office. She took out her phone and called her best friend, Susan. Susan was a journalist, and she had a knack for digging up information. "Hey, Susan, it's Emma. I need your help with something." "Sure, what's up?" "I think Mark might be involved in something shady. I overheard him talking to a man in a suit about a shipment that's coming in tonight. Can you help me find out more? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Emma, are you sure about this? You don't want to jump to conclusions. I know, but something doesn't feel right. Can you at least do some dating for me? Okay, I'll see what I can find out. But be careful, Emma. You don't want to get in over your head. Emma thanked Susan and hung up. She decided to go back to Mark's office and confront him. As she approached the door, she could hear raised voices coming from inside. She paused for a moment, unsure of whether she should go in or not. But then she heard Mark's voice, clear and angry. I don't care what you say. We're not doing it. There was a pause, and then the man in the suit spoke. You don't have a choice. You're in this too deep now. Emma's heart was pounding as she pushed open the door to Mark's office. Mark and the man in the suit both turned to look at her. Emma, what are you doing here? Mark asked, his voice strained. Hi. I overheard you talking earlier, Emma stammered. What's going on? What shipment? Mark looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. It's nothing you need to worry about, Emma. Just some business stuff. Business stuff? Emma echoed, incredulous. You sounded like you were involved in something illegal. I heard you say, make sure everything is ready. Mark sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Look, Emma, there are some things I haven't told you about my job. But I promise you, it's not illegal. It's just complicated. Complicated, Emma repeated. That's not good enough, Mark. I need to know what's going on. The man in the suit cleared his throat and stepped forward. Miss, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private conversation. Emma glared at him. I'm not leaving until I get some answers. Mark stood up and walked over to her, his expression pained. Emma, please. I can't explain everything right now. But I promise you, I'm not doing anything wrong. I love you, and I would never do anything to hurt you. Emma looked up at him, her heart breaking. She loved Mark too, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll leave, but we're going to talk about this later. With one last look at Mark, she turned and walked out of the office. Emma spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to focus on anything. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was keeping something from her, something big. She tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer. She even drove to his office again, but he wasn't there. As the evening wore on, Emma grew more and more anxious. What if Mark was involved in something illegal? What if he was in danger? She couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Finally, around 9 p.m., Mark called her back. Emma, I'm sorry I couldn't talk earlier. Things got really busy at work. Mark, what's going on? Emma asked, her voice shaking. There was a long pause before Mark spoke again. Emma, I need you to listen to me. You're not going to like what I have to say, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Emma hesitated, her heart pounding. I don't know, Mark. What's going on? Mark took a deep breath. Emma, I work for a government agency. We handle sensitive information and carry out covert operations. That shipment I was talking about earlier, it's classified. I can't tell you what's in it, but I can tell you it's not something that can be discussed over the phone. Emma's mind reeled. A government agency. Covert operations? It all sounded so unbelievable. Mark, are you telling me the truth? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Emma. I swear it. I know it's a lot to take in, but please, trust me. Emma thought about it for a long moment. She loved Mark, and she wanted to believe him. But could she really trust him? And even if she did, could she handle the knowledge that her husband was involved in dangerous, top-secret work? Finally, she made up her mind. Okay, Mark, I trust you, but we need to talk. In person, tomorrow. Please, can we meet? Mark let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, Emma. Yes, let's meet tomorrow. I'll explain everything then. With that, they said their goodbyes and hung up. Emma was left alone with her thoughts, still reeling from the bombshell Mark had dropped on her. The next day, Emma woke up early and spent the morning trying to process everything that had happened. She still couldn't quite believe that her husband was involved in such dangerous work, but she had decided to trust him. She knew they needed to talk things through and figure out how they were going to move forward. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop near Mark's office. When Emma arrived, Mark was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. As soon as Emma sat down, Mark launched into an explanation of his work. He told her about the agency he worked for and the various operations they carried out around the world. He couldn't give her many details, but he'd assured her that everything they did was in service of protecting the country. Emma listened carefully, trying to wrap her head around everything. It was all so far outside her experience. Mark, this is all so overwhelming, she said finally. I had no idea you were involved in something like this. I know, Emma, and I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. But it's not something I can talk about with anyone. It's classified. If I told you, I'd be putting you in danger too. Emma nodded, understanding. She still had a lot of questions, but she knew she wasn't going to get many answers. Okay, I understand. But what happens now? How do we make this work? Mark hesitated for a moment before speaking. Emma, I have to go on a mission. It's going to be dangerous, and I don't know how long I'll be gone. I need you to stay here and keep things running. Can you do that? Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Of course, Mark. But when will you be back? I can't say for sure. It could be weeks or even months. But I promised you, as soon as I can, I'll come back to you. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know how I'm going to do this without you, she said. Mark reached across the table and took her hand. You're strong, Emma. I know you can do this. And when I get back, we'll figure out how to move forward. They sat in silence for a few minutes, lost in their own thoughts. Emma knew it was time for Mark to go, but she didn't want to let him go. Finally, he stood up. I have to go, Emma. I'll call you as soon as I can. Emma stood up too, and they hugged tightly. I love you, Mark, she said. I love you too, Emma. Always. And with that, Mark left the coffee shop, leaving Emma standing there, alone and scared, but determined to keep going. Emma stood there, her heart racing as she waited for her husband to respond. She could see the shock and fear in his eyes as he processed what she had just told him. For a few moments, there was complete silence in the room. Finally, her husband spoke up. I can explain, he said, his voice shaking. Emma didn't want to hear any explanations. She had already heard enough to know that something was seriously wrong. Explain what? That you're having an affair with my best friend. She spat out, tears streaming down her face. Her husband hung his head in shame. I didn't mean for it to happen, Emma. It just did. Please, you have to believe me. I love you. I always have. Emma felt sick to her stomach. The man she had loved and trusted for years had betrayed her in the worst way possible. She couldn't even bear to look at him. I need to get out of here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. Emma didn't know where to go or what to do. She got in her car and drove aimlessly, her mind racing with a million different thoughts and emotions. How could her husband do this to her? And with her best friend, no less. She thought about all the times they had spent together, the laughs they had shared, the secrets they had confided in each other. Emma felt like such a fool. How had she not seen this coming? Finally, she pulled over to the side of the road, unable to drive any further. She put her head in her hands and cried, feeling completely alone and betrayed. After what felt like hours, Emma wiped away her tears and started to think about what she was going to do next. She knew that she couldn't just sit around and wallow in self-pity. She needed to take action. Emma pulled out her phone and dialed her best friend's number. She needed to hear the truth from her own mouth. The phone rang several times before her friend finally picked up. "Hey, Em," she said cheerfully. "What's up?" Emma took a deep breath. "I know," she said simply. Her friend's voice faltered. "What do you mean?" "I heard you and my husband talking at his office," Emma said. "I know that you're having an affair with him." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, her friend spoke up. "I'm sorry, Emma. I never meant for it to happen. It just did." Emma felt a wave of anger wash over her. "How could you do this to me?" she shouted into the phone. "You were my best friend." "I know, and I'm sorry," her friend said, her voice cracking. "I don't know what else to say." Emma hung up the phone, feeling more lost and alone than ever before. Emma drove home, her mind racing with thoughts of her husband and her friend. She couldn't believe that this was happening to her. She had thought that she had a happy marriage, but it turned out that her husband had been cheating on her for who knows how long. When Emma pulled into the driveway, she saw that her husband's car was there. She took a deep breath and walked into the house, preparing herself for what she was about to face. Her husband was sitting in the living room, his head in his hands. He looked up when he heard her come in, his face pale. "Emma, I can explain," he said, standing up. Emma shook her head. "I don't want to hear it," she said. "I heard everything at your office. How long has this been going on?" Her husband hung his head. "It's been going on for a few months," he admitted. "I'm sorry, Emma. I never meant to hurt you." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "How could you do this to me?" she asked. "We've been married for 10 years. We have a family together." "I know, and I'm sorry," her husband said. "I don't know what else to say." Emma shook her head. "There's nothing you can say," she said. "I need some time to think." Her husband nodded, tears in his own eyes. "I understand," he said. "I'll give you some space." Emma walked out of the room, feeling more lost and alone than ever before. She had no idea what she was going to do next. For the next few days, Emma tried to keep herself busy and distract herself from the pain. She took her kids out for ice cream, went for long walks in the park, and even started working on a painting that she had been putting off for weeks. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the fact that her life had been turned upside down. She couldn't believe that her husband had been cheating on her. She had trusted him completely, and he had betrayed her. One day, Emma received a phone call from her friend, the one who had been having an affair with her husband. Emma didn't know whether to answer the call or not, but eventually, curiosity got the better of her. "Hello," Emma said, her voice shaky. "Emma, it's me," her friend said. "I know you're probably angry with me, but I just wanted to apologize." Emma felt a surge of anger. "Apologize? You've been sleeping with my husband." "I know, and I'm sorry," her friend said. "I never meant to hurt you. I never thought it would go this far." Emma felt like screaming. She couldn't believe that her friend was trying to make excuses for what she had done. "I don't want to hear it," she said. "I trusted you, and you betrayed me." "I know, and I'm sorry," her friend said again. "I just wanted you to know that I never meant to hurt you, and I'm ending things with him, so you don't have to worry about that anymore." Emma didn't know what to say. Part of her was relieved that the affair was over, but another part of her was still angry and hurt. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally, "but thank you for telling me." Her friend sighed. "I understand," she said. "I'll give you some space. Take care of yourself, okay?" Emma hung up the phone, feeling more confused than ever. She didn't know what the future held for her, but she knew that she needed time to figure things out. Days turned into weeks, and Emma tried to move on with her life. She went back to work and started focusing on her career, throwing herself into her projects and deadlines. But no matter how busy she kept herself, she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered within her. One day, Emma's husband called her. She had been avoiding his calls, but this time, she picked up. "Emma, please," her husband said. "Can we talk?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "What is there to talk about?" she asked. "I just want to explain," her husband said. "I know I messed up, and I'm sorry." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. After everything that had happened, her husband still thought that a simple apology would make things right. "You're sorry," she said. "That's it. That's all you have to say." Her husband sighed. "I know it's not enough," he said. "But please, Emma, can we just talk about this? I don't want to lose you and the kids." Emma didn't know what to say. Part of her still loved her husband and wanted things to go back to the way they were before. But another part of her knew that things could never be the same again. "I need time," she said finally. "I need time to think about everything that's happened. I need to figure out what I want." Her husband didn't say anything for a few moments. "Okay," he said finally. "I understand. Just know that I love you, Emma." Emma didn't say anything in response. She hung up the phone and sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to process everything. She knew that she couldn't make any decisions right now, but she also knew that she couldn't keep living like this forever. Days turned into weeks, and Emma continued to try to make sense of her feelings. She talked to friends and family, trying to get their opinions and advice. But ultimately, she knew that she was the only one who could make this decision. One day, as Emma was walking through the park, she saw a couple sitting on a bench, holding hands and laughing together. For a moment, she felt a pang of jealousy, wishing that she could go back to a time when she and her husband were that happy. But then she shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She couldn't keep living in the past. She had to focus on the present and the future. As she continued walking, Emma saw a sign for a therapy group for people who were going through a divorce or separation. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was too soon for her to start something like this. But then she thought, why not? It couldn't hurt to try. Emma signed up for the group and started attending weekly sessions. At first, she was nervous and felt out of place. But as she listened to the stories of the other people in the group, she realized that she wasn't alone. There were so many other people out there going through the same thing she was. Slowly but surely, Emma started to heal. She started to see that there was life after her marriage and that she could be happy on her own. She started focusing on herself, taking up new hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends. And eventually, she knew what she had to do. She called her husband and asked to meet with him in person. She was nervous, but also determined. They met at a coffee shop, and Emma took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, "and I've come to a decision." Her husband looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" he asked. "I want a divorce," Emma said firmly. Her husband's face fell. "Emma, please," he said, "don't do this. We can work things out." But Emma shook her head. "No," she said. "I can't keep living like this. I need to move on with my life." And with those words, Emma knew that she had made the right decision. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She knew that there were still tough times ahead, but she also knew that she was strong enough to face them. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about her future. As the sun began to set, Emma made her way back to her car. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she had to find out. Emma drove home with a heavy heart, dreading what she might find. When she got home, Emma found her husband sitting on the couch, looking at his phone. He looked up when she came in, but quickly looked away. Emma could feel her heart racing in her chest. She walked over to her husband and sat down beside him. "What's going on?" she asked him. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "Please don't lie to me. I heard you on the phone today. Who were you talking to?" Her husband looked at her, then looked away again. "It's nothing. Just work stuff." Emma knew he was lying, but she didn't press the issue. She knew she had to find out what was going on, but she didn't know how. The rest of the night passed in silence. Emma's husband went to bed early, leaving her alone on the couch. Emma stayed up for a while longer, thinking about what to do next. She knew she couldn't let this go, but she didn't know where to start. Emma eventually fell asleep on the couch, her mind racing with thoughts of what might be happening behind her back. The next morning, Emma woke up determined to find out what was going on. She got dressed and headed out to run some errands, but her mind was still focused on her husband and the strange phone call she had overheard. As she was driving, Emma's phone rang. It was her husband. "Hey, are you busy right now?" he asked. "No. Why?" "I need you to come by the office. I forgot my laptop and I need it for a meeting this afternoon." Emma hesitated for a moment, but then agreed to swing by the office. When she arrived, her husband met her at the door. "Thanks for coming," he said, handing her a key card to get into the building. "Just swipe this to get in and then head up to my office. My laptop should be on my desk." Emma took the key card and headed up to the office. When she arrived, she found her husband's laptop sitting on his desk, just as he had said. But as she was about to leave, something caught her eye. There was a folder on his desk with a name on it that she recognized. The name of a woman she knew her husband had worked with in the past. Emma's heart raced as she opened the folder. Inside, she found pictures of her husband and this woman together. They were laughing and smiling, looking like they were having a great time. Emma felt sick to her stomach as she realized what was happening. Her husband was having an affair. Emma sat down in her husband's chair and tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The pictures were recent. She could tell by the clothes her husband was wearing. And they weren't just work-related either. They were on vacation together, at a fancy restaurant, even at a wedding. Emma's hands shook as she closed the folder. She knew she had to confront her husband, but she didn't know how. She couldn't even begin to imagine how he could have done this to her. She sat there for what felt like hours, lost in thought, until she heard someone knock on the door. "Emma?" Her husband's voice called out. "Are you okay?" Emma took a deep breath and tried to compose herself before calling out, "Yeah, I'm fine." Her husband walked into the room and immediately noticed the folder on his desk. "Emma, I can explain," he began. But Emma didn't want to hear it. She stood up and held the folder out to him. "I think these pictures explain everything," she said coldly. Her husband's face fell as he realized what she had found. "Emma, please, let me explain," he said again. But Emma just shook her head and turned to leave. "I don't want to hear it," she said. "I can't even look at you right now." And with that, she walked out of the office, leaving her husband standing there, alone and ashamed. Emma drove home in a daze, barely aware of the traffic around her. She couldn't believe what she had just discovered about her husband. How could he have been seeing another woman behind her back for so long? She parked the car in the driveway and sat there for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. She knew she had to talk to someone about what had happened, but she didn't know who to turn to. Finally, she picked up her phone and dialed her best friend's number. "Hey, Emma? What's up?" her friend answered. Emma's voice cracked as she said, "Can you come over? I need to talk to someone." "Of course," her friend replied. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." Emma hung up the phone and walked into the house, feeling lost and alone. She didn't know what the future held for her and her husband, but she knew that things would never be the same again. When Emma's friend arrived, Emma poured her heart out, telling her everything she had heard at her husband's office. Her friend listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. "I can't believe he would do this to me," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. We've been together for so long, and I thought we had a strong marriage. I know, Emma, her friend said, putting a hand on her shoulder. But sometimes people make mistakes. It doesn't mean your marriage is over. Maybe you can work things out. Emma shook her head. I don't know if I can forgive him for this. How could he lie to me for so long? I understand, her friend said. But you don't have to make any decisions right now. Take some time to process everything and figure out what you want to do. Emma nodded, grateful for her friend's support. She knew she had a long road ahead of her, but she also knew she couldn't face it alone. Over the next few days, Emma tried to make sense of what she had learned. She talked to her husband, trying to get him to explain why he had kept this secret from her for so long. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice breaking. I was ashamed of what I had done, and I didn't want you to think less of me. But you lied to me, Emma said, feeling the anger rise in her chest. You made me believe that everything was okay when it wasn't. I know, and I'm sorry, her husband said, tears in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. Emma didn't know what to say. She wanted to forgive him, but she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. She needed time to think things through and figure out what she wanted for her future. As she sat in her living room, staring out the window, she knew she had a difficult decision to make. She had always believed that honesty was the foundation of any good relationship, but now she wasn't sure if she could ever trust her husband again. She knew she needed to make a choice, but she also knew it wouldn't be easy. Emma took some time off from work to think things through. She went for long walks and spent time with her closest friends, trying to gain some perspective on her situation. As the days went by, she found herself thinking more and more about what she wanted for her future. She knew that whatever decision she made would have a profound impact on her life. One afternoon, as she sat in a coffee shop with her best friend, she made up her mind. I've decided to leave him, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Her friend looked at her with concern. Are you sure? She asked. You've been together for so long. Maybe you should try counseling or something before you make any rash decisions. Emma shook her head. I've thought about it a lot, and I know what I want. I can't stay with someone I can't trust. I need to move on with my life. Her friend nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'm here for you, no matter what you decide, she said. Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she had made the right decision for herself. A few days later, Emma sat across from her husband at their kitchen table. She had packed her bags and was ready to leave. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice firm. I can't be with someone I can't trust. I need to move on with my life. Her husband looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. Please don't do this, he said. I know I messed up, but I love you. I need you in my life. Emma shook her head. I'm sorry, she said. It's over. I can't go back to the way things were. Her husband looked down at the table, tears rolling down his cheeks. Emma could see the pain in his eyes, and a part of her wanted to stay, to comfort him and make everything better. But she knew she couldn't. I'll always love you, she said softly, but I need to do what's best for me. And with that, she picked up her bags and walked out the door, knowing that her life would never be the same again. Dear viewers, I hope you enjoyed this story. It was a story about love, trust, betrayal, and forgiveness. Emma's journey was a roller coaster of emotions, and I hope you were able to connect with her in some way. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope to see you again soon for another fascinating story. In the meantime, goodbye. But don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video.